Hi, fourth graders. Today we're going to be looking at what is a plot. A plot is used to tell a story. All stories must have a plot. No plot equals no story. Fill in your notes-taking page. Pause the video in order to make sure that you get the answers in correctly. For there to be a story to tell, something has to change. Just think, if everything stayed the same, there would be no story. Fill in your notes page with change. Examples of change in a story. So, an event may change. We've got two friends who go on a hike. They start. Two friends are standing at the beginning of a hiking trail, looking at a map. The change is they start hiking the trail. That is the event. Fill in an event may change. Another example of change in a story is that a decision is made. The hikers decide to take a break to roast marshmallows. The hikers are hiking along the trail, and then the change is that the hikers decide to stop. A decision is made. A relationship may change. The hikers disagree over the best way to roast marshmallows and stop speaking to one another. The hikers are preparing to roast the marshmallows, and the change is that they disagree and stop speaking. That's their relationship has changed. Another example of change in a story is that a character trait may change. One hiker becomes rude and makes fun of the way the other hiker roasts his marshmallows. The hikers are roasting marshmallows. The change happens when one hiker exhibits rude behavior. So a character trait may change as an example of change in a story. And the last one could be an understanding may change. For example, the hiker realizes that he was being rude and apologizes to the other. The hiker's being rude, and the change is that the hiker understands that he was being rude and apologizes to the other. Fill in an understanding may change on your notes-taking page. Let's think of a trail in the woods. Plot is the map from point A to point B. So we're going to map the plot in a story. Here's an example of a very famous nursery rhyme that we all know. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Let's think of that trail in the woods. We've got point A. Jack and Jill are at the bottom of the hill. Then Jack and Jill go up the hill. That's a change. Jack falls. That's another change. And Jill comes tumbling after. Yet another change. Point B is Jack and Jill are back at the bottom of the hill and probably a little bit bruised. In this example, the story started and ended in the same place. However, many stories start and end in different places. So let's take a look at the elements of plot. All plots have standard elements. These standard elements always happen in the same sequence. Otherwise, the plot just doesn't make sense. First, we have what is called the exposition. That is here at point A. It is the beginning of the story. The characters and setting are introduced. Fill this in on your notes-taking page. The exposition, we've got the characters and setting are introduced. Then we have the rising action. The rising action comprises of the largest part of the story. The main character's problem is revealed through a series of events. The story becomes more complicated and tension is rising for both the main character and the reader. That's our rising action. Fill it in on your notes-taking page. Now we're going to take a look at climax. We're going to zoom in on the climax. The climax is the most intense part of the story for the main character. A major event occurs where the main character must face the source of conflict. It can be the turning point of the story. Fill in your notes page with climax and the turning point of the story. Next, we're going to zoom in on the falling action. Falling action is when the tension settles and the story begins to move toward an ending. We start to see the results of the main character's actions and how those actions will affect himself and others. Elements of plot, part 4, falling action. The conflict begins to be resolved. Let's zoom in on the resolution. The resolution is the conclusion of the story. Any remaining issues are wrapped up. The story usually ends in a way that satisfies the reader. Resolution, the end of the story. The outcome of the story is revealed. Now let's complete a plot diagram for the story of Jack and Jill. Let's begin by reading a more detailed version of the story. It's washing day at the Johnson house. Jack and Jill's mom asks them to fetch a pail of water. The well is at the top of the hill. They know the pail will be heavy once it is full of water, so they climb the hill together. They arrive at the top of the steep hill out of breath. Jack fetches the water from the bottom of the well. They carefully lift the bucket out of the well and then start down the hill together, each with one hand on the pail. Suddenly, Jack trips. He begins rolling down the hill. Jill, caught off balance, falls and comes tumbling after Jack. They arrive at the bottom of the hill, dazed, confused, bruised, and with no water. They hobble home to tell their mother what just happened. When they arrive home, Mrs. Johnson mends Jack and Jill's cuts and bruises, and then goes up the hill to fetch the water herself. So let's take a look at our exposition. It's washing day. Jack and Jill's mom asks Jack and Jill to fetch a pail of water. The well is at the top of the hill. The rising action. Jack and Jill go up the hill together. They arrive at the top of the hill. Jack fetches the water from the well. Then Jack and Jill start down the hill together with the bucket between them. And the highest point of the story, the climax, well, that's when Jack falls. And the falling action. Jill comes tumbling down the hill after Jack. Jack and Jill arrive at the bottom of the hill bruised and with no water. Jack and Jill hobble home. The resolution. Jack and Jill's mom mends their cuts and bruises. Jack and Jill's mom goes up the hill to get water herself. Fill these in on your notes-taking page. Remember to pause the video so you can get this information in. Now let's do a plot diagram for the story of Little Miss Muffet. The nursery rhyme. We all know. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider, who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Let's take a deeper look into this story. Miss Muffet was hungry. She had been up for hours cleaning the house for the visitors that would be coming to her apartment that evening. It was almost noon when she realized that she hadn't taken the time to eat breakfast yet. Miss Muffet prepared her favorite breakfast, curds and whey. She looked out the window and saw that it looked beautiful outside. She decided to enjoy her breakfast on the tuffet on her balcony. Miss Muffet sat down and began eating her curds and whey. Suddenly, she saw a spider crawl across the balcony floor and stop right next to her tuffet. She screamed, jumped up, and ran into her apartment. Miss Muffet finished her breakfast at the kitchen table. So we've got our exposition of this story is that Miss Muffet has been cleaning her apartment for visitors all morning. It's almost noon and Miss Muffet hasn't eaten breakfast yet. The rising action. Miss Muffet decides to make herself breakfast. Miss Muffet looks out the window, and because it looks beautiful outside, she decides to eat her breakfast on her balcony. Miss Muffet sits down on her tuffet to enjoy her breakfast. And the climax. Along comes a spider. The falling action. Miss Muffet screams, jumps up, and runs inside. The resolution. Miss Muffet finishes her breakfast inside at the kitchen table. Here are the notes that you need to fill in to plot out the story of Little Miss Muffet. This last story about Fido, please go ahead and read it, and then fill in on the last page of your notes-taking page the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution on your own. Thanks, fourth graders. I hope that you understood plot. See you soon.